again. I'm Reverend Mel Caraway, past president of Texas Impact. I'm currently serving as the Interfaith Climate Coordinator for our affiliate, Texas Interfaith Power and Light. As an active member of the U.S. faith climate advocacy community, I've attended several previous sessions of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. These conferences of the parties are commonly known as COPs, and this year's meeting is COP 28. This year I've opted not to attend in person. Instead, I am following the conference online, and you too can follow along online from your home or office. You can follow the COP outline. The QR code that's on your screen right now will take you to the COP platform where you can see menus of all the sessions. Many of these sessions are being archived as on-demand webcasts that you can watch later at your convenience. And here's the second QR code for a special list of side events. Side events are workshops and panels on a wide range of topics, and the speakers include academics, policy advocates, and representatives of impacted communities. The heart of the Paris Agreement is something called NDCs, Nationally Determined Contributions. These are the commitments countries, or in UNFCCC parlance, the parties, have made to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to keep global warming from exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius by the year 2050. While countries are making the commitments, the reality is that implementation happens largely at the subnational level. As numerous subnational leaders have said, government near the people is where the rubber meets the road. In this last episode of our series, we're going to hear a conversation about the work local governments are doing to support their countries in meeting their NDCs. Two of the speakers on this panel have the title Climate Champions. The role of climate champions was established as part of the Paris Agreement in 2015 at COP21. To connect the work of governments with the many voluntary and collaborative actions taken by cities, regions, businesses, and investors, nations decided to appoint two high-level champions. The UN Climate Change High-Level Champions for COP25 at Madrid and COP26 in Glasgow were Gonzalo Munoz and Nigel Topping. They established a climate champions team to help them deliver on their mandate to enhance ambition and strengthen the engagement of non-state actors in supporting the parties. Also, they're working with the Marrakesh Partnership to deliver the goals of the Paris Agreement. Dr. Mahmoud Mohiuddin and Her Excellency Ms. Razan Al-Mubarak are the UN Climate Change High-Level Champions for COP27, which was last year in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, and COP28, which is going on right now in Dubai. We heard from one of the original climate champions, Laurence Tubiana, in our first episode. And today in this clip, we'll hear from Manuel Pulgar Vidal, Climate Change and Energy Global Lead at the WWF, the World Wildlife Fund, and we'll also hear from Gonzalo Munoz, UNFCCC High-Level Champion at COP25.
What conditions do you think need to be in place for subnational governments to take this opportunity to have a more prominent influence in the new NDCs and to increase ambition, but also to gain more capacity for implementation?
Thank you, Luli. Let me start by agreeing with Gonzalo that, that the Argentinians could develop their own "we are stealing" just in case. No? That it could be called "aquí estamos che," or to be a bit more malcriado, dejate de joder, could be. That is a very Argentinian phrase. But so, to go back to your question, Luli, sorry for that. But I was thinking of what it could be the title of the Argentinian ACA. Luli, more than conditions, I think it is courage. Courage to contribute. Because, look the title of today's event. Road to 2030, and I will make a reflection of 2030. Role of subnational governments and non-state actors, and strengthen NDCs. And we are in the COP28, in the first time ever in which, as part of this ratchet mechanism, we are having the global stocktake. And as you know, the global stocktake, it is a mechanism to identify exactly where we are, how well, how bad, how much, how less we have progressed. But more than that, because probably since the beginning we knew what it would be that balance, more than that, the global stocktake must send a clear message to strengthen NDCs. Because if the outcome of the global stocktake it is weak, the next cycle of the NDCs, it will be as well, exactly the same. And we could lose 5 years. And I am not sure how many of you have already read that today is early in the morning new draft of the global stocktake. There is not any mention on cities, not any mention on subnationals. There are very weak mention to the role of the non-state actors in the Marrakesh Partnership. So what it must be our role? To go to connect with negotiators, to go to the media, to talk on these events, to say, no, that is not enough. It is an unbalanced text. Because, okay, it is true, we are talking about energy transition, that it is the key element. We are talking about adaptation, loss and damage, finance. But to have a well-balanced text, we do need to promote a whole-of-society approach, to strengthen that whole-of-society approach by strengthening the role of the non-state actors and subnational governments, plus to bring nature more close into the climate debate. So this is the time to contribute, because if not, we will keep the subnational and non-state actors out of the preparation of the new cycle of the NDCs. But it is not just about NDCs. It is also about long-term strategies, because an NDC for 5 years without a clear vision for 2050 won't work well. And many countries, unfortunately, haven't yet developed their long-term strategies. And that is not good, because it is by knowing exactly where are we planning to be in X time of 25 years, 26 years, that we could be more effective in moving things forward. So that is my first reflection, courage and contribution. But also it is about strengthening the ability of subnational governments to develop their own plans and to have those plans feeding the national process. Because if not, can you imagine in a huge country, I am Peruvian, how many district municipalities we have? 1,800. And for sure the national government won't invite the 1,800 municipalities to say something that could contribute or could fit the NDC. It must be the opposite. It must be, again, the courage, the proactivity of those subnational to bring elements into the NDC. And why? Because it is more connected to citizens, to people. It is more connected to the ground. And we know that by the end, it will be at the local level in which things have to be implemented. So that is why the importance of subnational government. Third, I think, again, it is not a condition, but it is probably a communication effort to understand that in a subnational level, things have to be improved, because it is in that subnational level in which we can strengthen energy efficiency. The new text of global stocktake, it is talking about doubling energy efficiency rates. Where that must happen? In the local governments. That must happen in the subnational level. But also it is related to transport. Also the global stocktake, we hope, could include something about electric vehicles. where those electric vehicles are used to be, in the cities. And also it is related to public transport system, more effective public transport system. That happen on the cities. When we think about nature-based solutions, there is a connection with cities to integrate the climate effort with the nature objective. So we have to be more clear to communicate to people, to our constituency, to our to individuals, that cities must play, are playing, but also could play even a higher, a more key role. So again, Luli, it is not about conditions. It is about courage, understanding of the process. Because as Gonzalo mentioned, when we started the action agenda, it was in 2014, it is true. We did it because we saw in Warsaw in 2013 that all the non-state actors used to be out of the venue. And we knew that the only way to promote an agreement, it would be by bringing actors into the venue and by doing them party, to be more clear, kind of party. And that is why when we organized our first ever action day, that it was in Lima, we did it in the plenary room. Because we also tried to transmit the idea, you are as a party. You are part of this process. And for sure we counted with the support of the Stanley Center, no, that we have always welcomed. Thank you very much. And we did it, and look now. We have created a monster. No. But look this dynamic. It's amazing. There are some people criticizing why we have 100,000 people in a COP. Yeah, there are pros and cons for sure. But this is showing what it is the current state of the process. And with this, I will finish this reflection. That used to be a political one. Before of Paris, this used to be a political process. No, everybody was very well focused on the political decision, and we got it with the Paris Agreement. But the Paris Agreement, it was like a big bang. That is my analogy. And that big bang created an expanding universe in which, for sure, still the political side, it is so important. Negotiators, this is a party-driven process. But all the other side, more people, more aware of climate change and its consequences if we are not able to address the climate change. So it is social. It is economic. It is for sure an economic process. And we can smell and feel that immediately in this COP. It's financial and it is moral. And that is something that we have also to continue transmitting, communicating. This is a moral process. It's an ethical one. And it is because ethical that we have to connect with people. And that means to connect individuals in the local level, even in the poorest areas of the world. So to conclude this first intervention, Luli, it is not conditions. It is understanding and courage.
Thank you very much, Manuel. And thinking for Gonzalo, I think everyone in this room we're all standing in the same side of the street in the subnational non-state actor arena and feeling, I think, what Manuel has described. I didn't know if the monster was ACA or the COP, but I think we have two monsters. But inevitably, we are looking at the other side of the street, and the national governments are on the other side of the street. So what do you think in this process of strengthening the NDCs? What is your expectation of national governments, or what should we demand of national government taking this approach? As Manuel said, we need to be courageous and proactive and get our subnational governments get their feet, in the door. What would you say we need to ask of them?
Yeah, I would think that I start by not expecting to receive, but rather to give. and maybe we might receive something if we give. So I would focus on what can we give that might be meaningful for the process and for ourselves. I'm going to use an analogy that I always use when explaining what is a COP and why are we gathering here. So, and please, Manuel, you have been president of COP. You correct me if I'm saying something wrong. But this is like a spaceship. So this is out of the world, right? So imagine that in the minds of the negotiators, they're out of the world. Even they say, like, they talk about the real world. So let's imagine that that's what's happening. They are like in this spaceship that normally in every negotiation, you have different spaceships coming out of the world once they have to negotiate. So we have this spaceship now on climate. We will be, like 2 weeks ago, we were in Nairobi, but we were in a spaceship on the INC3 for plastics. And same thing happens every time that they have to negotiate. They go out of the world. They're very cautious on who's invited to that. Super picky. Are you so that creates a sort of how do you call casta? A caste, right? They are the ones that are allowed to be negotiated because that's their role. And the rules of the game are that. I'm not criticizing the rules of the game because the rules of the game were set to create the conditions for being isolated and allow every single member state to have a say and to allow the less empowered ones in the real economy to be able even to block, right? So, I mean, the rules of the game have a reason, still are operating, and therefore we have this spaceship. And then Manuel, with many others, he just described it, said, okay, wait, but then we will have to implement. And the implementation will happen down there with those people that are saying, they are the responsible of the mess, right? It's not us, it's that they are responsible of the mess. So how do we connect to them? So the Global Climate Action Agenda was like a tube connecting the spaceship with the Earth. And the role of the champion is to manage that tube. And would you have, like, imagine different spaceship and different tubes connecting this different spaceship with there. And then all of a sudden, these irresponsible people creating this monster allowed people from the Earth to, like, go up to the spaceship. And that created, nowadays, they are validating, right? Of course, probably many of us as well are like, what, 100,000 people? Wasn't it too much? But in other spaceships, that creates attention. You can see, like, potentially in Minamata or in Stockholm or in the INC, they're not used to have, like, who invited these people to come into our spaceship? They must be down there implementing what we decide. Okay? The reality, and a good reality, I would say, from this process is we're already integrated. So why am I referring to this? Because first, it's extremely important for us to respect the process. This is a party-driven process. And therefore, every time that we want to just disrupt or bring the rules of the Earth to the spaceship, that is, at the end, playing against ourselves and sometimes playing against the objective of solving the crisis. So we have to be very wise on how do we intervene in the process. And what's the best way to intervene in the process? Bringing what they want to see. What they want to see, that we are helping to solve the crisis and that we're capable even further with it. That's the only thing that we have to do. Not complain if whatever is not the way we want, not complain if the process is whether too slow or too quick, or they're talking about something that we don't want to. We have to do the job. And if you don't like it, well, there are other spaceships also. Or remain in the Earth, right? But if we're here and if our purpose is to really be fruitful for the fulfillment of the Paris Agreement, then the only thing that we have to do is go there very respectfully, understanding where are the right connections, and say, hey guys, I have this capacity of removing some tons, or incrementing resilience, or adapting this community, or increasing the capacity of nature, and bring that with science. And I can assure you, and that's the logic of the Paris Agreement, of the Ambition Loop, and the Global Climate Action Agenda, that if done well, then they will detect that and they will feel much more comfortable saying, okay, then we can enhance our NDCs, right? It's not that until potentially the rules are differently. In this moment, the rules are not other than that I'm mentioning. I think that it will be great if the evolution of this takes us to a moment where first we can integrate not only the 3 Rio conventions or everything that is talking about the environment into something like, I would love to see like not only 100,000 people, 500,000 people coming to the unique COP, the environmental moment for the planet. So then we can just travel once, I'm saying because also I'm traveling quite a lot, but then we can just travel, all of us, to one, and I can imagine that design of how we can coordinate, and we're all traveling to our Earth Summit every single year is one. We do the work, probably one negotiator will kill me because she's going to end all of them, but then we will have to provide the conditions for those delegations that have less people to have it. I mean, I see that getting solved. And then, of course, I think that there's also a potential opportunity, of course, I said as well, but there's a potential opportunity with the regenerative artificial intelligence coming to our lives. This conversation will be disrupted by that technology, definitely. Can we use that as non-state actors to help the process to move forward in a better and faster way? But again, showing that we're not just here to talk, we're here to show what we do down there in the earth.
Thank you so much for that great analogy. And now I have an easy way to explain, as you said, what are COPs. And using another analogy, on the first 2 days of this COP were dedicated to the local climate action summit. And I think for the first time, we saw a great number of mayors and governors that came to COP. And as you said, they were invited into the spaceship, and now more people can be inspired, familiarized, and as you said, making the connections of where and how to contribute. So when we were sitting there that day, we were in a room full of mayors and governors, and I spent there quite a few hours. And so I was observing the room, and then I thought, even Michael Bloomberg was in the room at some point, but I thought almost the guy that is making the coffees is the most important guy in the room. Everyone goes to him also, and there's a point of common interest. And often we miss, in these big talks, when we're in the spaceship or outside of Earth, like who are the people on the ground and how can we get them on board? Not everyone will be able to come to the spaceship. Even if we make one COP for all environmental themes, I don't know where we could fit. But Manuel, I wanted to ask your view about how do we ensure when we were having a conversation, we called it like the social license of the climate regime, the climate movement, because subnational governments or companies need the support of the people to be courageous, to take these bold measures and actions that we are asking them. And some of these measures, like asking them to travel less, to reduce their meat consumption, to not drive their cars so often, they're unpopular, a lot of them. And so I feel we put elected officials and even CEOs sometimes in a difficult position, And so how do you think that we can ensure that there's this social license and so that they can be courageous and take this bold action without fear of losing public support?
Yeah, it is true. There is always a cost of a transition. Immediately we can recognize the positive, the easiest way to transition, but also there will always be the painful way to do that transition. That is a good way, or good segue to talk about just transition. What it is about just transition? Just transition, it is to manage well the potential negative consequences of a desired change. That is just transition. So we have clarity on what it must, we have to do or what it must be done. The point it is how to manage the consequences of that. If I am planning to change the main economic activity of a region to leave behind and to phase out coal, probably that could have economic consequences. So there are some tools as just transition to manage those kind of consequences. But I am always thinking that people, it is every day more aware and better informed of what it must be the change. For sure, again, sorry, Argentinians, my friends, no, it will be extremely difficult to switch into having meat. No, in Argentina, it is like, it's so difficult. But we know that a healthy diet includes to have a more diverse diet. That means, again, information. We know what does it means to switch our habits of consumption, and what does it means to switch into not being so dependent of internal combustion vehicles. So there are many, many things that we have to work on. So that is why subnational government needs to create mechanisms to communicate, but to change behavior. In WWF, I think it was our Swiss office, 2 years ago, they released a very good report on how to work to change or towards behavioral change on citizens, towards addressing climate change in an effective way. And that is something that I am pretty sure that mayors, subnational authorities can promote. Because it is true, the lack of information can create reaction, but well-informed people will immediately understand the need to change. But also, Luli, again, I am bringing something that I've already mentioned. I am always saying, if you don't follow these transitions suggested by science, it is not the Paris Agreement that will punish you, because the Paris Agreement doesn't include any ways, any sanction or any ways to punish anybody. It is the economy on one side, but also you will be punished by extreme events. So that is something that mayors and authorities and subnational, but also the business sector must understand well. If you do like to survive on time, if you do want to have a sustainable economic activities, you have to follow climate conditions. And by now, climate and nature conditions, as it was mentioned by Gonzalo when he refers to the Global Biodiversity Framework. And probably that would be the best way to explain to people the why. The why. No, because, look, in Latin America, CEPAL or ECLAC in English, mentioned in a report released, I think, in 2020, that the lack of climate responsibility could mean a structural loss of GDP in 25%. 25% of a structural losing of GDP if you don't follow climate conditions. That is a reality. And if we are not able to understand that, the gap in between developed and developing world, it will be even higher. So by using the economy, sometimes also we can explain to mayors and authorities, to business sector, and even to citizens, why we must start to walk those transitions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you bringing in the topic of just transition, because I think we always, or at least in my case, I often think about the just transition only or mostly in the energy sector. But I think what you are pointing to is that there are transitions in every sector, and we will have to make them just, and we have to anticipate the gains and losses. And that's what the framework for just transition gives us, a framework to look at any transition and anticipate and create the conditions so that you have social support for taking decisions or measures that are hard to confront, at least at the beginning, no? Our first reaction. So, Gonzalo, I don't know if you want to add anything in terms of how you see or how you've thought about transitioning in specific sectors or work areas like plastic, like all the challenges that you said that are related to climate, and that we cannot separate these agendas?
Well, I think that in all of these agendas, one thing that I normally refer to is the importance of watching the film and not just the frame of today, right? The frame of today still is quite depressing and makes us feel like the challenge is so big and the gap is enormous, and therefore that we will never get there. If any of you, mostly the one of us with gray hair or less hair or whatever, that have been following this conversation for a while, we should recognize that even how was our optimism and our capacity of dreaming in terms of solutions before Paris? How was it like 4 or 5 years ago? And we will discover, not that we're great, that doesn't mean that we solve it. Like still, the situation is quite depressive, but there's something happening that we can use for filling that gap, and we will notice the trend. And in many aspects, the trend is one that is showing us quite substantive, positive direction. It is happening with renewable energy, it's happening with batteries, it's happening with, of course, electric vehicles. Like in many other technologies, we're seeing that trend, what we call the exponential change and the S-curve. And in many other sectors, it seems like the curve is starting to ramp into exponential, whereas in some other sectors, we're still not clear. For those sectors, and mostly I would refer to those that are based on nature. Now, we have, in terms of technology, seems to be ramping up quite well in terms of nature, and it's the capacity of restoring nature and healing the planet in that sense is something that we still need to see. So then what we're mentioning all the time is great to have a vision on 2030 or 2050, but the important thing is how you're going to plan your transition from now to there, and therefore have a very short-term task ahead. Hopefully not more than 2 years. What are you going to do now? So that will bring the sense of urgency to our daily life, right? I think that we have been improved our community in terms of the vision of the limit being 1.5 degrees, and how we understand the importance of regeneration, and how we understand the importance of stopping plastic pollution and restoring biodiversity, are things that are more and more clear for all of us, and I would say in the narrative is quite set. Now the important thing is what we're going to do now, not what I'm going to do in 2030 or 2050, right? So now the narratives are on the transition plans. The transition plans brought into budgets, brought into hopefully the incentives for the people for what they're going to do in the month, right? So in order not only to have this transition and have different scenarios that will take us to 2030 and 2050, so don't move the target, but then develop the sense of urgency. And in that sense, I think that for me, this is being a cup of urgency. I feel like not only because of the drama that is increasing all around the world, people dying. I was referring the other day, very sorry for that, but Taylor Swift, right? In terms of a very successful case of business, of show, of joy. We all love Taylor Swift, hopefully. I am a Swiftie. But then the world saying, yeah, but the emissions of the jet, what happens with it? People are fucking dying. That's what the highlight was saying in the news. And then all of a sudden, we know that there was a heat wave coming to Brazil. The producers remain with I have 3 daughters that traveled to Brazil for the show. And they were like, no, we will keep it. And then one healthy, young, amazing woman died. And then several hundreds have burns. And she herself was incapable of breathing. So this sense of urgency, I think, is helping us. And it doesn't mean that we have had one person dying. It's like showing us that millions of people are dying every month because of climate crisis. Then at the same time, I see on a very positive way that the adoption of the agenda in the first day, the loss and damage fund, and how much the money is flowing into there. All of those elements are elements of sense of urgency. Having a health day is brilliant because it's bringing a topic of long-termism to a very short aspect of our need of preserving our health and our life, and might help us to even develop this agenda towards some of the things that we did when we were confronting COVID, right? We were capable of doing incredible things, and maybe if we understand that this is a matter of health, meaning people are dying and other species are dying, then, well, we might do some things differently. In the agenda that I'm leading, food, bringing food and water into the conversation and with very concrete commitments. Well, that means that people need to understand that if we don't solve the climate crisis, we will have less and less available food and water. So I see that somehow the sense of urgency is cleaning the mess, and then we can focus on fossil fuels, right? I mean, when are we going to phase out of fossil fuels? But then it's the sense of urgency is positioning more and more, and therefore the logic of the transition plans should be totally integrated in our decision making for everyone in order to just focus on what I'm going to do in the next year, not where I'm going to be in 2050.
I hope you've enjoyed our mini-series on local climate action. If you feel inspired to strengthen your local community's climate leadership, there are many resources and organizations who are standing ready to support you. Here in Texas, Texas Interfaith Power and Light would love to partner with you on concrete action as well as climate advocacy. So let's keep 1.5 alive together. Thanks for watching.